Welcome back, Brotherhood of Darkness. It's Astrobat Devine here, and as you have read by the title, this will be another creepypasta. This one is called Abandoned by Disney. It is written by someone else, so they will be pointing at their view. You guys can actually decide in the comments below if it's true or if it's not. That's your choice. Be warned, this one has some content that might frighten younger viewers. So if you have no wish or you have a very overreactive imagination, please do not watch this video. But without further ado, let's read this shit. Some of you may have heard that Disney Corporation is responsible for at least one real live ghost town. Disney built the Treasure Island Resort in Baker's Bay in the Bahamas. It didn't start as a ghost town. Disney's cruise ships would actually stop at the resort and leave tourists there to relax in luxury. This is a fact. Look it up. Disney blew $3 million on the place. Sorry, that was incorrect. Yes, $30 million. Then they abandoned it. Disney blamed the shallow waters, too shallow for their ships to safely operate. And there was even blame cast at the workers, saying that since they were from the Bahamas, they were lazy to work a regular schedule. That's where the factual nature of this stories end. It wasn't because of sand, and it obviously wasn't because foreigners are lazy. Both are convenient excuses. No, I sincerely doubt these reasons are legitimate. Why don't I buy the official story? Because Mowgli's Palace. Near the beachside city of Emerald Isle in North Carolina, Disney began construction of Mowgli's Palace. In the late 1990s, the concept was a jungle-themed resort with a large, you guessed it, palace in the center of the whole thing. If you are unfamiliar with the character Mowgli, then you might be better remember the story The Jungle Book. If you haven't seen it anywhere else, you'd know it as the Disney cartoon from decades past. Mowgli is an abandoned child in the jungle, essentially raised by animals and simultaneously threatened and pursued by other animals. Mowgli's Palace was a controversial undertaking from the start. Disney brought up a ton of high-priced land for the project, and there was actually a scandal surrounding some of the purchases. The local government claimed eminent domain on the people's homes. They turned around and sold the properties to Disney. At one point, a home that was just being constructed was immediately condemned with little to no explanation. The land grabbed by the government was supposedly for some fictional highway project, knowing full well what was going on. People started calling it Mickey Mouse Highway. Then there was the concept art. A group of stuffed shirts from Disney Co. actually held a city meeting. They intended to sell everyone on how lucrative this project was going to be for everyone. When they showed the concept art, the gigantic Indian palace surrounded by jungle, staffed with men and women in loincloths and travel gear, well, suffice to say, everyone flipped their shit. We're talking about a large Indian palace, jungle, and loincloths, not only in the center of a relatively wealthy area, but also a somewhat xenophobic area of southern USA. It was a questionable mix at that point in history. One member of the crowd tried to storm the stage, but was quickly subdued by security after he managed to break one of the presentation boards over his knee. Disney took the community and essentially broke it over its knee as well. The houses were razed, the land was cleared, and there wasn't a damn thing anyone could do or say about it. Local TV and newspapers were against the resort at the beginning, but some insane connection between Disney media holding and the local venues came to play, and their opinions turned on a dime. So anyway, Treasure Island, the Bahamas. Disney sunk those millions in and then split. The same thing happened with Mowgli's Palace. Then it just all. Sorry about that. Construction was completed. Visitors actually stayed at the resort. The surrounding communities were flooded with traffic and the usual annoyance associated with the influx of lost and irate tourists. Then it all just stopped. Disney shut it down, and nobody knew what the hell to think. But they were pretty happy about it. Disney's loss was pretty hilarious and wonderful to a large group of folks who didn't want this in the first place. I honestly didn't give the place another thought since hearing it closed over a decade ago. I lived maybe 4 hours from the Emerald Isle, so that really I only heard the rumblings and didn't experience any of it firsthand. Then I read this article from someone who had explored the Treasure Island Resort and posted a whole blog about all this crazy shit he found there. Stuff just left behind. Things smashed, defaced, probably ruined by disgruntled former employees who had lost their jobs. Hell, the locals from all around probably had a hand in wrecking the place. People there just felt as angry about Treasure Island as folks here did about Mowgli's Palace. Plus, there was rumors that Disney had released their aquarium stock into the local waters when they closed, including sharks. Who wouldn't want to take a few swings at some merchandise after that? Well, what I'm getting at is that the blog about Treasure Island got me thinking. Even though many years had passed since its closing, I figured it might be cool to do some urban exploration of Mowgli's Palace. Take some photos, write about my experience, and probably see if there's anything I could take home as a memento. I'm not going to say I wasted no time in getting there, because honestly it took me another year after I first found the Treasure Island's article to get around to going up to the Emerald Isle. Over the course of that year, I did a lot of research on the Palace Resort, or rather, I tried to. Naturally, no official Disney site or resource made any mention of the place. They had all been scrubbed clean. Even odder, however, was that nobody before myself had apparently thought to blog about the place or even post a photo. None of the local TV or newspaper sites had one word about the place, though that was expected since they had all swung Disney's way. They wouldn't be there lauding their embarrassment, you know? Recently, I learned that corporations can actually ask Google, for example, to remove links from search results, basically for no good reason. Looking back, it's probably not that nobody spoke of the resort, but rather their words were made inaccessible. So in the end, I could barely find the place. All I had to go on was an old as hell map I'd received in the mail back in the 90s. It was a promotional item sent out to people who had recently been to Disney World, and I guess since I'd been in the late 80s, that was recent. I didn't really intend to hang on to it. It just got shoved in with my books and comics from my childhood. I'd only remembered it months into my research, and even then it took me another few weeks to locate the storage bin my parents had shoved it all into. But I did find it. Locals were no help, as most were transplants who had moved to the beach in recent years, and old residents who just sneered at me and made rude guesses the second I managed to say, "Where would I find Mowgli's?" The drive took me through an inordinately long corridor of growth tropical plants that had run rampant overpopulating the area, mixed with the native species of flora that actually belonged there and had tried to reclaim the land. I was in awe when I reached the front of the gates of the resort. Tremendous monolithic wooden gates whose supports to either side looked like they must have been cut from giant seculars. The gate itself had been gouged in several places by woodpeckers and eaten away at the base by burrowing insects. Hanging on the gate was a sheet of metal, some round scrap, that had a hand-painted letter scrawled in black, "Abandoned by Disney." Clearly the handiwork of some past local or employee who wanted to make some small protest. The gates are open enough to walk through, but not drive, so grabbing my digital camera and the map, whose flip side showed a layout of the resort, I set out on foot. The inner grounds of the place were just as overgrown as the entryway. Palm trees stood unattended and ragged among piles of their own coconuts. Banana plants similarly stood in their own stinking and bug-riddled refuse. There was a sort of clash between order and chaos, as carefully planted rows of perennial flowers mixed with obnoxiously tall weeds and stinking blackened mushrooms. All that remained of any outdoor structures were broken, rotting wood, and various charred bits of unidentifiable material. What was most likely to be an information of a booth or an outdoor bar was now simply a pile of assorted debris chopped up by past vandalism and ravaged by weather. The most interesting thing on the grounds was a statue of Baloo, the friendly bear from the Jungle Book, which stood in the sort of courtyard in front of the main building. He was frozen in a joyful wave towards no one, staring into empty space with a silly toothy grin as bird shit covered the whole swaths of his fur and vines and snared his platform. I approached the main building, the palace, only to find the outside of the building covered in graffiti with the original paint that hadn't peeled, chipped away. The front doors weren't just open, they'd been taken off their hinges and were stolen. Above the front doors, all the gaping maw where they had been, someone had once again painted, "Abandoned by Disney." I wish I could tell you about the awesome stuff I saw inside the palace. Forgotten statues, abandoned cash registers, a full-fledged secret society of homeless bums, but no. The inside of the building was so stark, so bare, that I actually think people had stolen the moulding off the walls. Anything that was too big to steal, counters, desks, giant fake trees, they were all resting amid the empty echo chamber that amplified my every step, like a slow rat-a-tat of a machine gun. I checked the floor plan and headed to all locations that might seem in any way interesting. The kitchen was as you'd imagine, an industrial food prep area with all the appliances in space. No expenses spread. Every glass surface was... Sorry guys. Every glass surface was broken, every door knocked off its hinges, every metal surface kicked and dented. The entire place smelled like very old piss. The huge freezer, not even remotely cool now, had row upon row of empty shelf space. Hooks hung from the ceiling, probably for hanging cuts of meat. I stood inside for a moment. I noticed they were swinging. Each hook swung in a random direction, but the movements were so slow and small that it was impossible to see. I figured it had been caused by my footsteps, so I stopped one from swinging by clutching it in my fist and carefully letting it go, but within seconds it started to swing once more. The public bathrooms were much in the same state as the rest of the place. Just like the Treasure Island Resort, someone had methodically smashed each proclaimed command with coconuts and other implements. There were just about half an inch of rancid, stinking, stagnant water on the floor, so it didn't stay there very long. What's odd is that the toilets and the sinks and the bidets in the ladies' room, yes, I went there, all dripped, leaked, or just ran freely. It seems to me that they would have shut the water off long ago. There were plenty of rooms in the resort, but naturally I didn't have time to look through them all. The few I did peer into were similarly wrecked, and I didn't expect to find anything there. I thought they would actually a television or radio in one room. As I really think, I heard a quiet conversation coming out. Though it was like a whisper, probably my own breathing, echoing in the silence, or just another case of the sound flowing water playing tricks on my mind, this is what it sounded like. I didn't believe it. A short and unknown reply. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Your father told you. Unknown reply, or possibly just weeping. I know, I know. That sounds ridiculous. I'm just telling you what I experienced. Why I thought there might have been something running in the room, or even worse, some vagrants who had holed up there and probably would have knifed me. At the front doors of the palace again, I figured I hadn't found anything of note and had wasted the trip up. As I looked out the door, I noticed something interesting in the courtyard that I had apparently missed. Something that would give me at least one thing to show for my trouble, even if it was just a photograph. There's a... Sorry about that. There as a lifeless statue of a python, maybe 50 feet long, coiled up and stunning itself on a pedestal right in the center of the area. It was almost time for the sun to start setting, so the light fell on the object in the perfect way for a photograph. I approached the python and snapped a photo. Then I stood on my toes and snapped another. I moved closer again to get the detail of its face. Slowly, casually, the python lifted its head, looked directly into my eyes, turned and slithered off the pedestal, across the grates and into the trees. All 50 feet of it, its head long disappeared into the woods, for its tail even left the sunning spot. Disney had released all the exotic animals onto the grounds. Right there, on my floor plan map, was the reptile house. I should have known. I'd read about the sharks at Treasure Isle. I should have known they'd done this. I was dumbfounded, just utterly stupefied. My mouth must have been hanging open for the longest time before I came back down to earth and snapped it shut. I blinked a few times and backed away from where the snake had been, back towards the palace. Even though it was totally gone, I still wasn't taking any chances and backed my way into the building. It took a few deep breaths and slaps on my own face to get myself right in the head again after that. I looked for a place to sit down, as my legs were feeling a bit like jelly at this point. Of course, there was no place to sit down unless I wanted to recline in the broken glass and dead leaf carpet or haul myself up onto the desk of questionable reliability. I had seen some stairs near the palace's lobby and decided to go have a seat there until I felt better. The staircase was far enough away from the front of the building to be relatively clean, save from the starting accumulation of dust. I put a wedge of metal off the wall, once again painted with the "Abandoned by Disney" motto I'd become accustomed to. I placed the wedge on the stairs and sat on it to at least keep. Sorry, guys. I placed the wedge on the stairs and sat on it to keep at least somewhat clean. The stairway led downwards below ground level. Using my camera flash as a sort of improved flashlight, I could see that the staircase ended in a metal mesh door with a padlock. A sign on the door, a real sign, read, "Mascots only. Thank you." This perked up my spirits a little bit, for two reasons. One, a mascots only area would have definitely had some interesting stuff back in the day. Two, the padlock was still in place. Nobody had gone down there. Not the vandals, not the looters, nobody. This was the one place I could actually explore and perhaps find something interesting to photograph or wantonly steal. I had come to the palace essentially agreeing with myself that it's okay to take anything I wanted because, hey, abandoned. It didn't take much to burst the lock. Well, actually, that's wrong. It didn't take much to burst the metal plate on the wall. That, sorry guys. It didn't take much to burst the metal plate on the wall that the padlock was hooked to. Time and decay had done most of the work for me, and I was able to bend the metal plate enough to pull the screws out of the wall. Something nobody else had apparently thought of, or hadn't been able to do at the time. The mascot's only area was a startling and very welcome change for the rest of the building, I'd seen. For one, every second or third fluorescent light overhead was illuminated, even though they flickered and faded randomly. Also, nothing had been stolen or broken, even if age and exposure were definitely taking their toll. Tables had notepads and pens, there were clocks, even a punch-in clock on the wall to complete with the filled-out time cards. Chairs were scattered around, and there was even a small break room with an old static-filled television and a long-rotted-out food and drink on the counters. It was like one of those post-apocalypse movies, where everything is left in a state of evacuation. As I walked the maze-like sub-basement hallways of Mascot's Only area, the sights just became more and more interesting. As I went further, desks and tables were knocked over, papers scattered, and almost meddled with the damp floor, and a large carpet of mould was slowly overtaking the real, rotting crimson floor covering. Everything was just sort of squishy. Anything wood disintegrated into mush when I applied in the least amount of force, and clothing items hanging on the hooks in one of the rooms simply fell to moist threads if I tried to unhook them. One thing that annoyed me was that the light was becoming more sparse and unreliable as I went further into the dank, suffocating depths of the place. Eventually I reached a black and yellow striped door with the words Character Prep 1 stenciled on it. The door wouldn't open at first. I figured this was probably where the costumes were kept, and I definitely wanted a photograph of the twisted, stinking mess. Try as I might, whatever angle or trick I tried, the door wouldn't budge. This is until I gave up and started to walk away. That was when there was a slight popping sound and the door creaked open. Inside the room was completely dark, pitch black. I used the camera flash to look for the light switch on the wall of the door, but there was nothing. As I made my search, I was jarred out of my sense by excitement by a loud electrical buzz. Rows of lights overhead suddenly flashed to life, flickering and fading in and out of the rest I'd passed. It took a second for my eyes to adjust, but it seemed like the light was just going to keep getting brighter until all the bulbs exploded. But just when I thought it would reach that critical stage, the lights dimmed a bit and steadied. The room was exactly as I had pictured. Various Disney costumes hang on the walls, fully put together like a strange cartoon cadavers hanging from invisible nooses. There was an entire rack of loincloths and native clothing on hangers towards the back. What I found odd, and what I wanted to photograph right away, was the Mickey Mouse costume in the center of the room. Unlike other costumes, it was lying on its back in the center of the floor, like a murder victim. The fur on its costume was rotting and shedding, creating bare patches. What was even more odd, however, was the colouring of the costume. It was like a photo negative of the actual Mickey Mouse, black where he should be white and white where he should be black. His normally red pants were light blue. I took a picture of the costumes hanging on the walls, upward angles, downward angles, Side shots show an entire row of frozen, putrid cartoon faces, some with plastic eyes missing. Then I decided to stage a shoot, just one, for the bedraggled characters' heads on the sleek, grimy floor. I reached for the headpiece of Donald Duck costume and carefully removed it so the thing wouldn't fall apart in my hands. As I looked in the face of the wide-eyed, mouldering head, a loud clattering sound made me jump with fright. I looked down at my feet, and there between my shoes was a human skull. It had fallen out of the mascot head and shattered into pieces at my feet. Only the empty face and the lower jaw remained, staring up at me. I dropped the duck head immediately, as you'd expect, and moved for the door. As I stood in the doorway, I looked back at the skull on the floor. I had to take a picture of it, I had to, for any number of reasons that may have seemed silly, but only if you think it through. I need proof of what happened, especially if Disney was going to somehow make this go away. I had no doubt in my mind right from the start, that even if it was just negligence, Disney was responsible for this. This was why the resort has closed, and I was the only one outside Disney Co. who knew. Me. That's when Mickey, the photo negative, opposite Mickey in the middle of the floor, started to get up. First sitting up, then climbing to its feet, the Mickey Mouse costume, or whoever was inside it, stood there in the center of the room, its fake face just staring at me as I mumbled no, over and over and over. With shaking hands, a violently thrashing heart, and legs that had once again turned to jelly, I managed... Sorry guys, let's check with it. I'll start again. With shaking hands, a violently thrashing heart, and legs that had once again turned to jelly, I managed to lift the camera and aim it at the opposite creature, now quietly sizing me up, head tilted. The digital camera screen displayed the only dead pixels in the shape of the thing. It was a perfect silhouette of the Mickey costume. As the camera moved in unsteady hands, the dead pixels spread, marring the screen wherever Mickey's outline moved to. Then the camera died, went blank and quiet and broken. I raised my eyes once again to the Mickey Mouse costume. Hey, it said with a perverted but perfectly executed Mickey Mouse voice. I want to see my head come off. It started to pull at its own head, working its clumsy glove-clad fingers around its neck with clawing, impatient movements similar to a wounded man trying to pull himself free from a predator's jaws. As it worked its digits into its neck, so much blood, so much thick, curdled, yellow blood. I turned away as I heard the sickening tear of cloth and flesh, only cared about getting away. Above the doorway, out of this room, I saw the final message clawed into the metal with bone or fingernails. Abandoned by God. I never got the pictures out of the camera. I never wrote the blog entry about it. And after I ran out of the place, fled for my own sanity, if not my very life, I knew why Disney didn't want anyone to know about this place. They didn't want anyone like me getting in. They didn't want anything like that getting out. So there you go, guys. That was Abandoned by Disney. If you enjoyed this, tell me. If you got creeped the fuck out, tell me. If you didn't like it, tell me. If you guys would like to suggest which creepypasta to do next, please go ahead. And yeah, thank you for watching this video. And if you have enjoyed this, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And as always, have a very dark day.